And welcome everybody to Agencies Talk. This is our weekly talk show where we get the chance to sit down with agency professionals and those who serve agencies to talk about what's going on in their world, what they're passionate about, and the various journeys that they have, of course, taken to get to the success that they have now. Today, we are joined by Stephanie Nivinskus. She is one of our DigitalMarketer certified partners. I call her the queen of copywriting. She's fantastic. And really, we're here to talk a little bit today about everybody's favorite topic, especially digital marketers, AI, but more specifically, how you can retain some of that human connection, the humanity in your copywriting and the things that you do, while still taking advantage of the different opportunities that AI can leave open for us. So without taking up more of your time, Stephanie, hello. Would you like to say hi to everybody? Introduce yourself a little bit.
Hi, everybody. Good morning, good evening, happy tomorrow, depending on where in the world you are. Yeah, I'm super excited to be here today. I love talking with my other agency peers and people who work with agencies. So rock on, this is going to be fun.
It's very exciting, of course. Everybody here, we took a little bit, ignore my dogs. We all know that work from home life. I apologize, but we all get it. Before we got the call started, I did kind of poll everybody who's in here to see who is using AI. Everyone raised their hands. Because it's not as scary as some people think it is, or even if it's not scary to you, I promise it's nowhere near as annoying as you think it's going to be. So one of the first
scary, Michelle.
What's scary?
What's really scary is people who are not adapting it out of fear. What's scary is what's going to happen to their companies as a result of not adapting it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So AI in and of itself doesn't need to be scary. But if you stick your head in the sand and you fail to adapt it, what could happen is scary.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Because you're missing out. Other companies are going to become more efficient. They're going to have better quality because they're not focused on these little things. They're able to focus on the important things. And so you're still going to be sitting there going, I can't think of a subject line for this email. I'm going to spend the next 30 minutes trying to make it punchy and something that someone would want to open while they've already trained their AI and they're like, oh yeah, write me that subject line. And in 30 seconds, they have it done.
Yeah.
So that kind of brings me to the first thing that I wanted to talk about today. And what do you think is the biggest misconception about using AI in copywriting?
Okay, well, let me preface this by saying that I have built my career around strategic planning and copywriting. I've been a copywriter for 28 years. Okay, so if I can start by sharing my personal journey. Okay, I think the first time I heard about AI being used in a copywriting sense was from Perry at TNC like 4 or 5 years ago when he introduced Jasper, I believe it was, right? And I was like, wait, what? He's cheating this system. And then I was like, oh, wow, wait, actually, he's brilliant. And he just dropped some big knowledge bombs. Okay, so fast forward to November of this year when ChatGPT came out, right? Yeah, a lot of marketers, a lot of copywriters, whatnot knew about how tools like Jasper could help with copywriting. Replace copywriters? I mean, maybe if you're not very good, yeah. But replace a seasoned copywriter, replace a copywriter that has a portfolio of documented results. No, not even close, right? You still need to sprinkle HI, human intelligence, with AI, right? I think the biggest mistake, the biggest misconception people have is that AI is in a place right now where it can work autonomously. And that is a huge misconception. And really, that's where things get dangerous. If people like copy and paste stuff that, ChatGPT or whatever produces without sprinkling it with human intelligence, that's when we start to see the bad stuff come out.
And so we talked a little bit about this before we started, and it was kind of the people who are going to not love AI in this situation are the ones who really probably aren't doing it right in the first place.
Yeah, I think so, because I see a lot of people, you see a lot of people dissing on AI. Oh my gosh, I tried ChatGPT. It was the worst copy I'd ever seen in my life. Right. I'm like, well, that's because you entered the worst prompt it's ever seen in its life. So it's all about, 28 years as a copywriter. I've written for some of the biggest brands in the world. My work has been used by Starbucks and the NFL and Quiksilver and huge brands that everyone has heard of, right? And the reason that people get so torn up over the fact that ChatGPT or whatever is producing these ridiculous results, I see AI, or I should say, I treat AI just like I would treat a human copywriter in my agency. I give AI a creative brief, okay? Just like in an agency, I'm going to create a creative brief and I'm going to tell you, this is the client, this is what they care about, this is what scares them, this is what their obstacles are, this is what keeps them up at night, this is what motivates them to get off the fence. All of the strategic information I feed to AI, and then I get killer results. It's when you don't feed it the right information that garbage in, garbage out, right?
Mm-hmm. Like, train your team, train your AI. And the people who get so angry about, like you said, I put it in ChatGPT and it was awful. My father-in-law, he's like that. He's totally not on the AI thing, and that's his business. I have no judge it, but he was like, tell it to do this. And I did, and it was like, that's wrong. I'm like, well, I didn't train it yet. I haven't told it anything, and look, I can fix this. I haven't told it what it needs to know yet. Right. So very much like you have to train a team member, you have to train this new software that's going to assist you to do the job.
Yeah. And if you don't train it, it's like a dog that's not trained. Okay. You don't train it, and your dog is going to, well, Michelle, sorry if this is getting personal.
No, it's her. It's fine. Crazy, it's the dog that keeps barking.
So I have 2 puppies, so I'm with you. Okay. But if you don't train the AI, it's the same thing as if you don't discipline your children, if you don't train a dog, if you don't, you have to train it. It's a robot. It knows nothing. Okay. It knows nothing about anything other than what it's been trained to do. So if you don't train it in your brand voice, with your clients, with your market position, et cetera, it is incapable of doing what you want it to do. It's really on us.
So I've got 2 examples that I've used with some people. One of them is when I was first starting my agency, I used to see a lot of lead gen type, one step above, what warriors do, a warrior, whatever, all about lead gen. And it would be, we have a great list of people. It will explode your agency, but they all involve cold calling. And that's not really my strength. And after a while, I began to realize that every single one of these offers were going to involve cold calling. And I didn't really need the offer if I was willing to do the cold calling, but I wasn't willing to do the cold calling. And the other example I gave a couple of months ago was Wix and Squarespace. If you remember, when these first came on the market, they were going to put web developers out of business because everybody can now develop their own website. Mm-hmm. Well, I am not a designer, and I don't care how easy Wix is to use. The website I create with it still looks like a 3rd grader did it.
Right.
So, that's kind of my example to people, is that Wix and Squarespace didn't put website developers out of business.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is, right now, the people that are going to win in this new era of marketing are those that assume ownership over collaborative intelligence. Okay. Collaborative intelligence, right? We work with AI. there was an article in Forbes that I read not too long ago, and it said, smart people plus smart tools equals smarter outcomes. I was like, yeah, that sums it up. There you go, right? Smart people with smart tools. AI is our smart tool. It's not a person. It's not going to replace the human brain. It will never, ever, ever, ever replace the human brain. It will automate automatable tasks. Let's put it that way, right? It'll touch on some things, but it's not going to replace a human. Like anybody who's saying that, you've watched too many Terminator movies, like turn off the TV.
Well, speaking of Skynet, Mark hopped on, our gracious host here. He loves AI. AI is his jam. So I am going to go ahead and kick it over to him so he can love all over this conversation.
Sweet.
All right. Thank you, Michelle. Yeah, no, it sounds like it's already super interesting. I love, it is funny what I just heard about, the use of AI and how it isn't going to replace people. And the way I usually explain it is that, it will replace responsibilities rather than positions. And so if it's eroding the marketplace, it's not going to be from like, hey, we don't need you because AI is going to do the exact same job. It's more that somebody like the people in this room could do way more tasks. So it's an amplifier of, your existing knowledge or your existing skill set, which means that you don't need to outsource to 10 VAs, or you don't need a whole department of people who could do a task that you might be able to automate and do yourself, because why involve more people than necessary? It's inefficient from every standpoint, and copywriting, of course, is one of those. And copywriting is really hard. Even understanding what good copywriting is a skill set that most people haven't developed. So yeah, it's not going to replace all people. It's going to replace some people, but that's why the whole marketplace is just going to change the way I see it. And
I think it's going to call people, and in particular, we're talking about marketing, it's going to call marketers to a higher level of human intelligence, right? So it's just going to challenge us if we've gotten lazy, if we've gotten apathetic, if we've gotten, whatever, we're just kind of like, hey, blah, blah, blah. We do things the way we do them, and we haven't really engaged our brain lately. It's calling us to a higher responsibility, like step up, let's go.
yeah, well, and you could find more information than you've ever been able to find before. It's kind of like, well, I always use the example of article writing, because you see, Julia McCoy is always talking about content at scale. I'm like, oh, it's this amazing article. It's like, yeah, it's an article, but if I had written about that same subject, I would have come to a completely different conclusion. On top of the fact that what it writes is not necessarily reflecting what my brand image is, in terms of writing. So until you and actually, speaking of that, Jasper just came out with their brand voice, which is something that they've been talking about doing for a while, which I think solves some of that issue, where it's like, yeah, anybody could go on ChatGPT and write an article about whatever, even if they don't know anything about it. But is it in your brand voice? Is it consistent with the styling that you present, so your customers and people who read it can identify your imagery, however you want to say it? No, the brand voice actually is supposed to do that. So that's why I'm kind of like, before, if it was just ChatGPT, no, it can't do what any copywriter can do. However, if you're a copywriter that say works with 100 companies, and I have to switch my voice for each one of those companies, I might not do a good job with that individual company as an AI that's been trained in the brand voice of that company. And now, no matter how good I am at writing, I'm still not going to be as good as AI copywriter for this specific brand.
Sure.
So in that regards, with these new tools coming out, do you think, like, what's the place of a copywriter in that? Do you think it'll start to be internalized, where copywriters will be more dedicated to less brands, maybe?
I could see a scenario for that, where you'll specialize in a certain type of brand. You just become a niche, right? You niche down, not just in an industry, but in a tone, right? I could definitely see that happening. I think that it's really the big wild, wild west, right? And we don't really know how it's all going to play out. right? But I can see the copywriters that are going to win at the end of the day are going to be the ones that are agile throughout this process of all of this AI copywriting evolving, right? Like, if I could share a story, you guys, when I first, well, I should say it was in November, right? When ChatGPT came out. And at first I was like, yeah, right. Okay, like can't compete with me. I was totally cocky. I'm sorry if that comes across as arrogant. That was the truth of how I was.
So arrogant.
Okay. Okay. Then it was December and everyone started talking about it. Like everyone. Okay. Then it was January. And I'm not kidding you guys. I went into like full on like grieving mode. I thought I mean, I'm like being dead serious here. Like I literally felt like I was depressed. And I was like grieving because I thought my art was being robbed from me. Right. And I was like, no, I've done this 28 years. You can't steal my art. Not at this point in my journey, not when I'm finally confident enough to show up. You know what I mean? And then
Well,
it was in February that I took the AI marketing boot camp.
ooh,
That's when we started that in February, right? I think.
so
Yeah. And it was in February when I took that. And then it was like, I think it was after the first training. And all of a sudden the lights went on. And I was like, okay, here's the way we're going to play as a copywriter. If we're going to have a puppet show, I'm becoming the puppeteer. Okay. Like if we're going to do the AI puppet show, I'm going to be, if we've got another analogy, we've got the AI orchestra. Well, I'm going to be the conductor of the orchestra. Right. And that is what copywriters and marketers as a whole need to do right now to get through this wild, wild west.
no, and I reflect that a ton because I was the same way before December. I was kind of like, AI, it's another, oh yeah, chat bots. Like that's all I thought about AI. I'm like that I've dealt with them. It's crap. It's confusing. It's worse than any interaction. So it's not a big thing to be concerned about. And then, yeah, getting on ChatGPT. And for me, it was the research side where I was like, oh my gosh, doing this on Google would take me 10 times longer. And now instead of doing that, I'll actually write a lot more because I have access to information instantly instead of having to dig through all the crap of what you get from Google. And so then I was like, oh, okay, it's going to be fine. But then everything started going way faster. And then I wasn't depressed about it. I was just like, okay, everything's getting out of control and I have no idea how to predict or come up with some kind of path that I could see forward with this. So I'm just going to assume that we're all starting from scratch. Like everything is brand new. So nothing anybody's ever done in the past matters that much because everything's going to be so much different moving forward. Now, after I want to say last month, I was like, okay, the development kind of plateaued where it's like, okay, everybody's kind of using it for what they can use it for. And nobody's coming out with anything too crazy that it's like unidentifiable of what is going to happen with this. And so that was a relief because I was like, okay, all the stuff that I think, because I've thought about this. If you check out my website, like I've been writing basically 1 to 5 years in the future of what I think the impact of AI is going to be. But it's taking a lot longer than I thought it was going to take for people to adopt. And so that was a relief. But the second thing I realized was that the human style of presenting information is still extremely valuable because we're the ones that consume that information. So even if an AI could magically become a human, it would still just be one human. Now,
Right.
With that said, I don't think there's ever been a really good framework of how, stylistically to approach writing for a brand. Like how, so I was going to ask you, the question is, have you come up with a way of, constructing the style of writing for a specific brand? Because I was kind of thinking of like, okay, well, if you can describe your voice, what would it be? Would it be cheeky and fun and irreverent, or maybe it's formal and computational and, But I'm trying to formulate, like, how do you stylistically approach copywriting for a brand so it's consistent? So no matter if a human or an AI writes it, it still sounds like the brand.
Yeah, I think it's a mix of, digging into the tone and the writing style with those adjectives that you just talked about, right? And really going beyond like friendly, you know what I mean?
Mm.
Like sometimes I see people using these really kind of basic, if you want to say, almost like generic adjectives, right?
Mm.
And but like your example that you just gave was brilliant, computational. Okay, that's not a word you're going to hear every day. And it definitely paints a picture that it has more depth. It has, there's just more depth to it, right? So I think part of it is using those really, really good modifiers, dictating the writing style, giving it examples of work that other people have done and put out there that you're like, yeah, this is what we're going for, this kind of tone, and then correcting it, right? Okay, so sometimes people will watch me do, like I've been doing these AI persona sessions. I got certified in Jeff Hunter's AI persona method, right? So that guy's brilliant. If you haven't done that yet, you guys all need to do that. Raving fan right here. But so I've been doing these AI persona sessions with people and added my own kind of sizzle to his process, right? And some of the things that we talk about are, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Oh my gosh, I'm so 50 years old.
Oh, I do that. It was, how are you starting to stylistically describe the process of copywriting for a brand?
I'm going to another planet now. Okay, stylistically. Okay, so writing tone, writing style, giving it examples. And then I like to, when I do these AI persona sessions, I think of like, and let's just talk about ChatGPT because that's what everyone's talking about, right? I think of ChatGPT as like a naughty little toddler. Okay. If you don't tell ChatGPT exactly what you want it to do or exactly what you don't want it to do, it's going to misbehave and do all the things that are not okay. It will run out into the middle of the street with an oncoming car, right? And you'll be screaming at it. Okay. What I mean by that is I tell ChatGPT all the time what I do not want. I don't only tell it what I do want. I say, do not do this, do not do that. Okay. And I actually put it in all caps. So because it's like my aggression reliever. I yell at it and I'm like, but because I tell it what I want it to do and my expectations are super clear, but then I also tell it, do not do this. It dials in my results, right? And that's the framework, the tone, the writing style, the examples, the do this, and the don't do that, right? It's pretty simple. It's like a 5-step framework.
Love it.
In that, shouldn't we?
Oh yeah, you need to make a name for that because that sounds, oh, well, I love it how what you are is also what you are not. And with all of those different parameters, if you had both, like, okay, my brand voice is this, it is not this. That way it never gets confused. Yeah. And actually that brings up another good point just about niching. Because I, when we always talk about niches, we're talking about your customer avatar, we're talking about your industry, we're talking about your individual space. But in the new AI world, I think niching in terms of a skill set like copywriting might not be an industry. It might be a style. Yeah. So if you're, for you, Stephanie, like you're awesome, you're bubbly, energetic, and maybe your niche is awesome, bubbly, and energetic, not engineer minded and technical and specific. And so if we are going to be, copywriters are still going to be working within multiple companies and maybe multiple industries, you could still have a niche, but maybe it's stylistic and less, specific to a business or a space.
Absolutely. If somebody told me to do technical writing, I would cry myself to sleep and then bury myself in a hole in the backyard. That sounds like the most dreadful assignment ever. It sounds like there's a lot of money in it, but it sounds so boring, I would die. So,
Well, you know what's funny is I think that kind of writing would actually be better from AI, you know, the more
mhm,
technical side, because there's rules around it. Whereas with what you do, there's less rules. You know,
yeah,
you could be you actually writing poorly might be part of the style.
it
If you think
totally is. And breaking the rules, breaking all the grammar rules you learned in third grade, right?
Mhm.
Like, I love it. My teacher was Mrs. Tenhagen, and I didn't like her. And so I love coming back as an adult and being like, let me show you, Mrs. Tenhagen. I can break all the rules and make somebody $1 million.
I'm gonna start sentences with and because all over the place.
I do. I'm going to write one sentence paragraphs, right? And hey, guess what? It worked. You know, I
Oh.
mean, not that I'm bitter or anything, but
No, actually, my least favorite teacher of all of school was the one that taught me the Oxford comma. And it's like one of the most strict rules that I maintain.
okay. You want to know something funny? When we hire copywriters, one of our interview questions is, are you a raving fan of the Oxford comma? Do you absolutely hate the Oxford comma? Or did you have to Google it to look up what the Oxford comma really is? Right. And that's one of our interview questions. And it's so funny. People have such strong feelings about it. Yeah.
Oh, did you just log them out if they say they'd never heard of it?
Yeah.
Like you just
That
send
was
me,
a clear,
you have failed.
that was an indicator that, yeah, you probably shouldn't be a copywriter.
No, but that's fantastic. But again, it goes back to writing style, you know, because I think some of the people who are the best copywriters are the ones that are able to translate the kind of conversational writing directly and maybe have no technical skills in terms of everything else, but they're able to convey themselves. I remember in fitness, I would see guys like that where I'm just like, man, this is horrible writing, but it keeps you on the page for
Yeah.
like 5,000 words somehow. And I'm like, I don't understand why I'm still reading this, but it's super engaging.
Right. Yeah.
So do you and just going back to the test, because really, who cares if you know the Oxford comma, if you're just really good at writing dumb conversational copy.
Yeah. True.
So in that way, do you think there's a way, you know, a rating system that we could come up with how to qualify a good copyright, an AI empowered good copywriter?
Mm. Wow, that's a great question. A rating system to qualify a good AI copywriter.
I have some ideas, you know, of how to do it, but I'm you know, I like video games. So I was actually having this conversation with the team yesterday where I was like, oh yeah, basically all the skill sets I have are developed in the same way that you see character build up in like a RPG. And so now I'm starting to rate everybody. I'm like, that's a great idea. We should just gamify professions and figure out how specifically to qualify everybody, because everybody has the same tool, right? They have ChatGPT. Everybody can write.
This is why you're the president of DigitalMarketer, because that's how your brain works. I love that idea.
Well, if you think about it, you could actually just take your parameters, your tone, your writing style, and just come up with a rating system for each specific skill set, with AI being a skill set. Like
Yeah.
how well can you manipulate AI? And
Yeah.
then you just have to have a qualification system for how you would rate those other parameters. So
Yeah. I
tone.
mean, I imagine the next time that we hire somebody, we'll probably have them do a test assignment where we'll tell them, use AI to write this and show us, show us the prompt that you engineered for AI. Okay. Then show us the results you got, and then show us what you did with it to make it better.
Love it. Yeah, that's a great way to test it, because
Yeah.
then, well, because you could read 5 different ones and be, this is the good one. This one sold the thing the best and was the
Yeah.
most engaging.
Yeah.
Or sorry, I get off track on these database parameters. But yeah, the judgment of the style is another parameter, because really with marketing, we default to what made the most money, what got the most leads, what had the greatest effect on the numbers.
Mhm.
But with copywriting, it's more abstract than that.
Yeah.
And what copywriting actually leads to is also more abstract than, oh, it made sales because the headline was written right and the hook was written right. And just the the rabbit hole of all your writing needs to lead to that one result, which means what's good writing.
Mhm.
So in that sense, when you're looking at, okay, I'm going to judge a copywriter based on what they do with a brand, how do you judge consistency across, say, a sales page versus an email campaign versus a written ad copy?
I think I would judge consistency just based on the style and the tone. And is the brand, are we consistently saying the things that are going to resonate deeply with the audience, right? Are people being emotionally moved? Are they, I think about, do you remember that show Mad Men?
I should
Okay.
rewatch it right now.
I know I should too, right? It got a little bit raunchy, but aside from the raunchiness, it was very interesting. I don't know if you guys ever watched that episode where it showed the pitch for Kodak for the slide deck in the 60s, right? And it showed the character Don Draper was like something like, every memory is stored in here, and now you'll never forget, da da da, with your kids, da da da. And it like literally, I'm like sitting in my living room crying at Don Draper's words. I'm like, oh, that was so beautiful, right? But it was because it was so, the emotional hook was so strong, right? And that's so much of what copywriting it all comes back to, is that emotional hook. How is it impacting human behavior, right? Employing the psychology, the buying psychology. Yes, data matters, and at the end of the day, the numbers are the judge of a success of a campaign in many ways, but not the only judge that we should be using, right? How is it impacting awareness? How is it building trust? How is it overcoming objections? How is it doing all of those things, right? Harder to assign metrics to, but it can be done with a little creativity. And I bet there's some awesome AI tool that someone in this community is developing right now to make that a lot easier to measure.
I was just thinking about that. I'm like, oh my gosh, I think I could write a prompt where I could judge people's writing based on these parameters, just with like a few things, where I could say, okay, here's a point system, and based on the writing, try to pull out these aspects, the emotional impact, the psychology, the logical arguments, or whatever you want to have. Actually, you could just look up any copywriting style and just include those in it, and have it start judging writing, and assign kind of a gamified version of judging individual pieces of content. So I think,
I bet ChatGPT would do it today.
I could probably write a prompt in like 10 seconds.
Well, and you think about it like, maybe, we base it on the ADA framework, or the PASS framework, or the LOVE framework that I
love framework. Yeah, I love
that recently.
That's fantastic. So yeah, maybe you have different judgment systems based on that. So, all right, I'm going to pivot the conversation a little bit now, because I think one of the biggest issues with copywriting and everything that we're talking to is that all the information that's being used by AI in order to generate all that copy is being pulled from a million different places that didn't necessarily give the authorization for that information to be used in the writing that the AI is generating.
Yeah.
So what I think is going to happen is that everything we do is going to have to start to be licensed, where if you don't license the data, like all the content that you're creating, then you're essentially giving authorization to an AI to pull and use it to drive whatever it's building. In that regards, do you have any experience in terms of licensing the copywriting that you use? And do you think there's a way for AI to be applied to it to simplify, claiming or the rights to what you have created?
Yeah, I don't have experience with that per se, but I think it's definitely a very real concern that we need to think about. But I've been having this ethical argument with myself, right? Working through this. In the beginning, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe someone can just rip off my words, right? And then, basically spin them and make them their own, right? And I was getting all in a tizzy about it, right? About how wrong that was and whatnot, as what I call myself a word artist, right? But then I had a bucket of humility dumped on my head, okay? And I would say that it occurred to me, everything I know, I learned from someone else. Okay. Like, did I really come up with something totally and completely unique? No. Everything that I write is inspired by someone, or a framework taught by someone or something. So do any of us really own the rights to anything creative? And this is just a very real ethical argument I'm having with myself right now, where I'm like, it's like the angel and the devil are on my shoulder, like in cartoons, right? And it's like, no, protect the art. And then it's like, you don't own that art. Who do you think you are saying you own that art? You know what I mean?
Oh my gosh, that's a fantastic point, because I'm the same way, where sometimes you come up with something, you're like, oh my gosh, this idea is amazing, and then you start to tell it to people and they're like, oh yeah, I read that in blah blah blah, and you're like, oh crap, I read that in blah 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 too, and you're like, oh, we just have bad memories, and that's
Well,
where
case in point. Okay, case in point. I guess this was probably around December, and I was like all on my human intelligence train, right? And I was like, you know what? I'm going to start a whole movement about human intelligence and artificial intelligence and whatnot. And I thought I was the smartest person in the world. Human intelligence, nobody has said that. Yeah, like the whole world has said it. I just didn't know it. You know what I mean? Or I saw it somewhere. It was stored in the back of my brain, and it got dusted off. And I thought it was my idea, but it really wasn't. Right. So, yeah, I mean, I don't even know, like, if I had an opportunity to license the material that I've written, would I even want to do that? And I don't know that I would, because from an ethical perspective, on the other side of the coin, is it really mine to license?
Mm.
You know what
No,
I mean?
I think yes. If you officially say it, I do think you have the right to license that. And if it get, well, because the thing is, with these new tools and with the capacity of AI to really know information, it'll tell you if it's not, because you would say like, oh, okay, who's come up with this point? And all the data that we're going to have is probably going to be assessed like that. Where has it been said before? And then, but if everything you put out had, say, an NFT tied to it, like, hey, here's some copy for an ad, and here's the NFT associated with it because I put in the auto NFT maker device, and now it's mine. And if it gets used anywhere else where I didn't authorize, then it gets pinged and I get paid a cent because it got used somewhere else. Whether they were trying to or not, it was still, technically a violation of my license. And so I think, and that's a whole rabbit hole. I have a whole concept around licensing every piece of information we generate, because if you think about it, a picture that you take with your cell phone and you put online, like, that's an original piece of content.
Yeah.
And how many pictures do we upload? And then how much do you write?
It is. Yeah. I'm telling you, I have not come to a good conclusion with this. I'm still arguing with myself. Right. And I'm trying to figure out, where do I stand on the ethics of all of this? And it kind of changes by day. I haven't landed anywhere yet.
Yeah, I wouldn't overthink it too much, because I think there's going to be, I think the whole tracking thing is going to be a real thing, because it makes too much sense to do. And the only reason why we haven't done the licensing, and actually I wrote this in an article where I said that, Nike only has about 250 copyrights, which was surprising to me, because I'm like, wow, why don't they have like 1 million? They've been around for like 80 years. They've been doing advertising for the same amount of time, and they've come out with a zillion pieces, and they have 250. Like, it didn't seem significant. But then if you think about the enforcement of licensing, that's the real issue. It's just too much of a pain in the butt to, one, find people who are violating it, then 2, enforce the license, then 3, sue them for it, and then 4, make sure that the suing goes right. I mean, it's super expensive. But with the new tools and AI's ability to consume information, it's not a big deal. You could find that somewhere, and it'll be obvious. So I think it is going to come to licensing. And really what's going to come to a head is if you have, say, that capability is available, and now you have Nike, who has, $1 billion legal team, budget plus AI is free, then there's no reason why they couldn't just go out and sue everybody. So if we don't start claiming the information and the ideas ourselves, big corporations or somebody with money is going to do it for you. And what's going to happen is that your ability to create is actually going to be restricted because you didn't license the information that you actually create. So it doesn't matter if it's ethical, because the legal side is going to make a bigger impact than your conscious, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you're probably right. So I live in the world's most litigious state in California.
That's
So
not a problem.
quite frankly, I don't belong in this state anymore because I don't fit the profile. So I'm just not a litigious person. And so I'm like, hey, whatever.
Well, that's the problem is now it's not going to matter whether you're litigious or not, because it's going to start to impact your profession. So that's why I'm like, you know, before we couldn't do any of this tracking. We couldn't do any of this searching. And really the search we had was junk. You know, that's what we've been dealing with for a really long time. So I do think it will be Getty Images. That's a good point, Laurie, who's been sued by Getty. I had multiple clients who was just like, oh, they're trying to sue me for $50,000 for an article I wrote 10 years ago. I'm like, yeah, don't do that. Oh yeah, that happens all the time. I think it's happening less, but yeah, Getty's already suing all the AI, you know, generators for imagery because it says it's pulling images and it's terrible. Now, and that's the problem is it's like, and that's why I go back to like the style, like maybe you can't niche within a certain space, but you can niche a specific style that you write.
Sure.
And if you think about authors in general, that's why we like certain authors, because they write the way that we like. And so I think we all just have to probably take that approach to copywriting too.
Yeah. Yep.
So that wasn't really a question, but
That wasn't a question. I'm agreeing with you. Yes.
Okay, so let's say, any questions? Did I miss any questions, Michelle? I want to make sure I sometimes I ramble.
We did have one question from Lori about 10 minutes ago, but it maybe we can get some more context around it, but it was, how is that different from manually doing research and pulling together concepts?
I was just thinking about the whole that licensing your content so that the AI, no way AI could pull it. And, you know, how is that different from any of us doing research for a piece that you're writing to inform the opinion that you're going to write about? It's just the AI speeds it up, but is it any different?
Yeah, no, and I don't think it is from like a concept standpoint. But from a legal standpoint, again, we could reference the places we get stuff from, where if you go to ChatGPT and you could literally ask it, like, could you construct the sources of the answer that you just gave me? It'll say, no, I don't know where it came from. Now, sometimes it'll actually quote sources, but my theory is that it's actually reverse engineering the information, where it actually makes up a piece of information and then it verifies it somewhere else, and then it pulls that as the resource. That's my theory of what it's doing, because the way ChatGPT answers it is that it's looking at a giant data set. It just knows it. So it's kind of like you knowing, you know, some math equation. You're like, I don't know where I got that from. I learned it a zillion years ago, and it was part of my entire educational process. So I can't tell you why I know this thing. So that's the tricky part, because it isn't any different than what you're saying too, except as copywriters and as people, we know we could source the stuff. Like we could tell you, except now we use AI. So now we can't anymore.
But, you know, if you're using like web chat GPT alongside chat GPT, right? If you have that extension installed, then you do get the sources.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's possible. I mean, it's just tricky, because what I think is going to happen is that we're all going to be, you know, every brand's going to be dependent on its own set of data, its own set of original data. Because if you don't have the, you know, ability to power your own AI to make the answer, then nobody's going to do it. Because with generative AI, and this goes into a whole nother point about AI versus human writing, is if an AI has the ability to generate content for a specific person, because we're all users, all of our data that we have from browsing online is tracked. Let's say that Google decides that it's going to generate a piece of content specifically for a person. And even if you did the same subject technically, but you wrote it in a broad sense, which is what we all do, it's never going to be as good as a piece that's written for Stephanie. Like, I know Stephanie, I know what she does, I know what she likes, I know how she browses the internet, I know every piece of content she read. And I think this piece of content I could write specifically for Stephanie, and it's going to be awesome because I wrote for you. As copywriters, we can't do that because we have to write for people we've never known, will never know, and it has to be broad enough to get the result we want. So in that sense, how do you compete with something that's generating specifically for an individual when you have to generate your content based on a market?
I think we really need to do our research on the market. I think maybe we're being too broad with the market, right? And maybe we're not calling ourselves to that higher level of human intelligence where we're requiring ourselves to know that market almost like an individual, right? I mean, granted, we can't know everybody, right? But I mean, what about having the different avatars within a market, right? There, you know, for example, you're going to write for the, you know, the busy mom with 3 kids under 10 who is on her way to Pilates, right? Differently than you're going to write for the retired man who is, you know, working on, you know, his next passion project. You know what I mean? Right? Both of those customer avatars could be interested in buying the same product, right? But we know the avatar well, and we write for the avatar, right? As opposed to just being like, well, I just have to appeal to the masses, because, you know, when you try and talk to everybody, you really talk to nobody, right? Yeah. And so I still see a way to do that marketing research on a deep level, even in a big, you know, even when you're selling a product or a service that appeals to a broad audience. I think you just need multiple avatars and you write accordingly.
Yeah, I like that. But just to add on to it, I think instead, because, you know, AI, like I said, knows everybody's browsing habits, history, preferences based on what they've already done. I think as copywriters, if we could go into educating people on stuff they don't know, then that's probably the best approach. Because unless you are completely original with your writing and you're presenting new concepts that haven't been considered before or just aren't considered often, then you could compete with that, because you don't care about an individual because they've never understood or known your concept. Then your new piece, even if it isn't targeted specifically, or you incorporate that targeting that you mentioned, and a new concept, then you could start to get into, you know, competing directly with a AI that'll generate Mark's content whenever I look for answers.
I don't really see us as trying to compete with AI. I think we need to collaborate with AI. Right?
Oh, no. Well, humans need to. I'm talking about like Google's new service where they're basically composing content and putting the answers or, you know, the typical search results underneath a generated piece of content. Because in that sense, well, one, Google doesn't need to send us any traffic because it's like, I got it. You're okay. Go away. I'm going to put my own ads on my own piece of content. And now I don't need you anymore. I don't need anything anymore. You know, so that when I say compete, I mean more like you have a website and Google is a website. Who's going to win in the sense of generating content? Right. But it gets a little tricky. Axel, I saw you had your hand raised and we were both ranting.
Actually, when I work on the solar energy and all the solar panel things I did for the Chinese company I'm working with now, ChatGPT offered me all references.
Oh, it did.
Around about 200 lines of references according to different topics I opened up. So I just put it in there as an appendix and said, okay, come on, folks, if you'd like to read it, there's material, here's a conclusion. And they were really astonished about the content produced.
Wow.
So even when you verify the persona you're using, I made it for entrepreneurs and I did it for public health and for public organizations and things like that. And then specified the needs I had, specified they need, and they got me all the references.
Wow.
was
Okay. Yeah. So I have actually run my test in a while. So that sounds way better than what happened originally.
the
So
thing
I'll
is,
have to
the
revise.
more detailed you define your persona and target, the more specific your questions go, the higher the level of reference goes.
Mm,
If we can go full circle in this conversation, it all comes back to feeding AI a creative brief that has
Absolutely.
the heavy level of detail, right? And that's what gets you the good results. That's what gets you the references. That's what gets you what you really want out of AI.
no, that's great. Well, and one of my use cases that I like, and this is just something I do often because I have a lot of ideas for like science fiction stories because I read a lot of science fiction. And so, but I'm like, I can't write it. I don't have time. It'll take me too much effort. So what I'll actually do now is I will go find one of my favorite authors. I'll find a short story by that author, and then I'll load it in to train the AI. Then I'll feed it my concept, and then I'll have it write in the style of my favorite author. And then I have a new piece of content with my idea, incorporating all my, everything I want in this writing style I want. And it's a unique, entertaining piece where it's like,
Yeah.
I couldn't even write this like this. And I want it in the style of my author. And
Yeah.
so here we go. Now it's just like asking my favorite author to write a story for me based on a concept I make up. So
Yeah.
and that's kind of where a lot of my stuff comes from, where I'm like, there are styles and there are specific human elements of people that we like to read that can be reflected in generative AI, which means that as copywriters, we're going to have to do the same thing and become, I love Stephanie's copywriting. Like, I don't care
Yes, you do, Mark.
but if I wanted to do that, I could be like Stephanie's style, and I could generate my own AI that'll write exactly like you and whatever I want. So I think, and that's where the licensing comes in. So I think the next level of licensing will actually be a formula. This is my writing formula that I use, and that's what you're licensing out, because then Stephanie can write any piece of content for anybody, but it'll be proprietary to your style because you're the one that made it.
So for example, pulling from a real life thing, like StoryBrand,
Mhm.
right? They license the StoryBrand framework. Wait, is that where you're going?
It's a little bit more complicated than that because it's going to have to be more specific and kind of stylistically driven,
Okay.
And
Okay.
again, this already happens. It happens all the time because you have authors who write 100 books and people read that author because they
Yeah.
write it in the way they like.
Yeah.
So I think in terms of protecting the profession and protecting, the skill set that you've spent, a whole lifetime building, I think
Yeah.
that's the only way I could kind of come up with the concept of, it doesn't matter if you use AI to generate stuff because it's your formula that you're actually using it to generate.
Sure. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this unfolds. Yeah.
Well, we'll collaborate. We'll do an article about stylistic judgment.
I like that idea. Let's do that.
Yes, it'll be good. We're going to save the industry. It's going to be awesome.
Power to the copywriters.
Well, thank you, Stephanie. Sorry it was late, everyone, but I think this has been a great conversation. I love, talking to smart people with original ideas that incorporates, something that's probably going to change all of our lives forever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where can people learn more about you? Get into your style.
Awesome. This has been fun. Thanks.
Oh, no, sorry. Missed that last question. Where can people learn more about you? And
Where can people, sorry, I did not hear your question. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Where can people learn more about me? Okay, you can find me at sizzleforce.com. That's my website. Sizzle like bacon, force like may the force be with you. Sizzleforce.com. I'm on LinkedIn. My last name is really frightening, so maybe copy it from Zoom right now. LinkedIn.com/in/Stephanie Nivinskus. And I like to hang out here in the digital marketer community. And there you go.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Stephanie. I will be contacting you next week. We are moving forward with our new copywriting cert. So all of this is super timely and relevant, and we're supposed to be coming out with that estimated July, maybe a little bit later, but that's what we're going for. So I'll let you know.
Rock on. Love it. Thanks, you guys. This is fun.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Okay.
And thank
bye.
you all for tuning in. This has been a blast. We'll be sure to look at this. We'll be posting it online, and then we'll also be, if you just follow our social, we actually come out with clips of these all the time. So stay tuned.